I've been to a few salons. I've been working through the process with clients, and I'm finding it fascinating, first of all. And I'm curious, and maybe our listeners are too, how you came up with this method and then created the blueprint and then the pivotal aspect of having the guides be a part of it.
Got it. Okay.
I know that's a 3-part question.
That's fine. That's fine. So how I came up with the method. So a little bit of backstory. So let's get into that for a minute, and then we will get into. So the backstory is that I spent 30 years being in the world of business. First half of that being a management consultant, working with teams across the world, trying to build large projects in India, raise capital across the world, bring capacities and technologies and competences from across the world to build airports and ports and complex stuff like that, and try to make them happen in India. And so very interesting work, very complicated work, very communication intensive work, and all of that stuff. And once I finished with that, and I kind of had my fill of that, I moved on to another career, equally fascinating. I completely shifted paths and became an internet entrepreneur at a time where neither the internet nor entrepreneurship was particularly big in India, and created India's first online travel community. Another incredible journey. But what kind of the common thread when I look back at these two journeys in business was that I spent a lot of time among really accomplished, successful professionals from across the world. And as I did that, I started to notice a pattern. And that pattern then became the source of my sort of inquiry for a long time in life, which is that a lot of successful people from across the world, when they get to success, realize that they haven't got something that they thought success would give them. They feel a lack. And the difficulty with that problem is that they can't really explain what that lack is. There is a lack. I know I don't have something, but I don't know what that something is that I don't have. So some people explain that in more common terms, like I'm not happy or I'm not contented. And some people will say, you know what, I'm not enthusiastic about life. Others see it in manifestations, right? I'm having difficulties with my relationships and, so on and so forth. Or somebody gets poetic and says, I have a hole in my heart and I don't know how to fill that. And when I heard that the first time, it really struck me as a good way to sort of describe it. And what intrigued me in that was that, I was roughly in the same place in a peer group in terms of accomplishment and success, but I didn't seem to feel the same problem, right? So that intrigued me a lot.
Seems like you had more awareness.
And I think so I didn't know why that is. And then I sort of spent time thinking about it. And that process of thinking, which took me a couple of years, took me back to my childhood. And I realized that part of it was because I grew up in a world which was very rooted in the sort of Indic way of living. There are a lot of things we now have big labels for and big names for, chanting and seasonal eating and yoga and so on.
Fasting.
And fasting and what have you, and art of a certain kind, and all of that was all just part of life. You didn't sort of have labels for them. They just existed. Your grandmother fasted. You woke up every morning and did certain things, and it was just what it was. And I came to the conclusion that a lot of that, not having that same sense of lack, had to do with that world that I lived, and which I had continued to live. So that way of living had continued. But what I did not understand in that is, how does that experience translate for other people? Because I was born into that context, but does it really work for other people, and how can I make it work for other people? So that became the sort of thing that I was obsessed with, saying, how can I translate this experience of mine into a structured thing that I can give to other people? And that led me to a decade-long journey into Indic knowledge. So I went back to what is the knowledge which kind of powers all of the stuff that I did. I just did by osmosis, right? I was there folks did it, I did it. But there is knowledge behind it, I suspect. And therefore, I went behind that to learn it. And I spent a long time. Read up a lot of stuff, met masters from around India, met grandparents from across India to understand, how they lived and what led to that and so on and so forth. And it is a sort of culmination of all of that in terms of all that knowledge being available now with me as a structured thing, and then thinking about it, saying, how do I translate all this for a contemporary existence? How does it work for a lawyer in New York City? How does it work for a stockbroker in Shanghai, and so on and so forth? And that, in a sense, that reflection ultimately led me to the Leela Life method and the 5x5 and many other frameworks that we use today.